Administration here?
Yes.
Oh, first of all, well, I told them what I told you. They did a great job of hosting this, and they've been a model ally, really a tremendous addition to NATO. Beyond that, we are cooperating. We have for a long time cooperated on issues of technology and so forth. As an example, Ericsson's a very important company. It's one of the only companies in the world that can compete in 5G and 6G with Huawei, for example. So we have a vested interest in that. We've partnered with Swedish companies for a very long time. Today we signed a memorandum of understanding that further adds to our cooperation on biomedicine, biotechnology, AI, all of these innovative, and we're building on a foundation of years and years, actually decades of cooperation between our two countries. In fact, the first country in Europe that signed on to Pax Silica was Sweden. So we have already sort of a pre-existing relationship when it comes to collaborating on innovation and in technology that just makes it logical to build on. And that's what we worked on today. And that I think is very meaningful, what we signed today, because I just think it's going to give further impetus to what we've already done in the past together.
Between President Trump and President Latching to Taiwan if that happens? And
would I do what now?
Would you join a call between President Trump and President Latching of Taiwan if that call happens? And can you tell us if preparations are underway for that as the president?
Yeah, I don't have any news on that for you today. I don't.
Sir, President announced 3.0. Is there a concrete timeline? Because many Europeans are maybe scared that we have less Americans. It's still the most powerful army in the world. So they want to know how much time do we have for this transition?
Well, I don't set those timelines, and I'm not going to give you a timeline today other than to say that it's something that needs to happen, and I think there's a growing acknowledgement in Europe. And look, I think that's the challenge, okay? And there's not a criticism, it's the challenge. Even though this is a coalition in terms of NATO, and even the EU is still a collection of individual states who all have different politics and all have different budgets and all have different political considerations. And understanding some of these countries have done a lot already and are doing, well ahead of schedule, and others not as much, and for a variety of reasons. And so that's always the challenge with this, is that it's at the end, even though it's an alliance, you're dealing with, individual countries who have their own political dynamics at play. And but look, it can't take forever, because ultimately there are decisions we need to make in terms of our own global force posture.
Can you talk about the role of Qatar in terms of negotiating an end to the Iran war? There's some reporting today that a Qatari delegation negotiating team is in Tehran coordinating with the U.S. on trying to bring the war to an end.
Well, the primary interlocutor on this has been Pakistan, and it continues to be, and they've done I think an admirable job, and that's what we continue to work through. Obviously, other countries have interests, because especially Gulf countries that are in the middle of all this may have their own situation going on. We talk to all of them, but I would just say that the primary country we've been working with on all of this is Pakistan, and that remains the case. And it's my understanding he was supposed to go yesterday, but it could be as early as today, that Field Marshal Munir could be traveling there very, very soon. And we're in constant communication with him at the highest levels of our government, are constantly talking to him.
The president announced that. Do you think that? Sorry, sir. Do you think that the administration has to respect the 76,000 threshold troops deployment, U.S. troops deployment in Europe, or set by Congress, or do you think you can go below that?
Below the
76,000 troops.
You're asking me a legal question, like of our laws, or no? We need to. The United States has global military commitments. We've made commitments to South Korea, to Japan, to other places as well. We're constantly reevaluating the threat matrix in the world. Where could a conflict emerge? Are we properly postured, and so forth? And so this is always the work. Every Department of War, every Pentagon, over every administration has constantly had to reevaluate these things. And so. We'll continue to reevaluate. That's been an ongoing process. It started from the first day of this administration, and throughout it, in coordination with NATO countries. So none of this is surprising, although, obviously I understand why it creates some, nervousness. But I think there's a broad recognition that there are going to be eventually less U.S. troops in Europe than there has historically been, for a variety of reasons. In fact, there was a surge after for example, the movement of troops from Germany that was announced a week ago. The Germans didn't freak out about it, because they knew it just took us back to the 2022 numbers, and it was, I think, a reduction of less than 11 or 12% of our total presence there. And understand, sometimes when these numbers come out, these aren't just people with guns. These are support staff. I mean, there's all kinds of other things. These aren't just fighters, war fighters necessarily. They're all the support that comes with it. So, although they may be in uniform, and so nonetheless, I mean, but that's always going to be an ongoing process. All right, I do have to run, so a couple more.
On that line, the role for NATO to play when it comes to the situation in Cuba?
NATO's far from Cuba.
I know.
Mr. Secretary.
We haven't talked about that at all.
What do you see as Sweden's role within NATO?
Important. I mean, Sweden's been an incredible addition to NATO. I understand there's a country that basically had to defend itself for a very long time, but it has a robust and mature manufacturing sector, industrial sector, technology sector. So, look, this is not a criticism, so I don't want you guys to read into this as like I'm criticizing some country. But generally, the additions to NATO have been countries that joined because they were in a weak position, and so they joined because they needed the collective strength of an alliance. But when we added the two countries, Sweden being one of them, these are two countries that brought to the table capabilities that NATO didn't used to have, and with whom we've already had long-term defense agreements for a very long time in cooperation. So Sweden was an incredible addition. It made the alliance much stronger, no doubt about it. And especially now, we're talking about one of the things we talk about is the defense industrial base. I mean, Sweden had a mature defense industrial base that it now brought into NATO. So the opportunity we already work on aircraft together and so forth. The ability to build on that is extraordinary, and that's one of the things we want to be able to do. And beyond defense, on other areas that touch on defense but maybe are not defense directly.
The Mr. Secretary,
did you get a question?
Only one.
I know, but this guy's greedy. All right, this is my last one. I apologize. I got to fly to India. Go ahead.
Greenland and the Arctic. Have you been discussing that?
We had an Arctic. Well, we didn't discuss Greenland today, but we had an Arctic meeting today of the 7 countries, and very positive. We'll have a joint statement. I don't know if it's out yet. It should be out in a moment. And I think there's a growing. Although this is an effort that's pre-existed, I think there's a growing commitment to make it a regular part of our engagements as NATO is to focus on Arctic security for obvious reasons. We're an Arctic nation. We're always going to be focused on the Arctic. It's great to see that other countries are part of this effort now, and that it's going to play a more prominent role. The Arctic is going to play a more prominent role in NATO and in discussions around NATO. So we had our political officers met a few days ago and worked out a lot of details on the joint statement, and then we had the foreign ministers meeting today and potentially a leaders level meeting at some point on it as well. So it's a good forum within NATO, and I thought today was very positive, and the joint statement should reflect that. Okay, I said that was about. I'll do one more because I'm a nice guy.
The president announced 5,000 troops going.
I
apologize.
All right, I'm going to do one more, and then I'll do you because you're so persistent. Go ahead.
Thank you. Have the peace negotiations under American leadership in Ukraine stalled? Do you think Europeans...
the peace negotiations on Ukraine under American leadership... Let me just say, we got involved, okay, because we were told we were the only ones that could do it. We were the only ones that the Russians and the Ukrainians would talk to. So we got involved. They were not fruitful, unfortunately. That's the play. We stand ready to continue to play that role, despite leaks that are not true, despite stories out there about us forcing the Ukrainians to take this position or that position, which are not true. If we see an opportunity to pull together talks that are productive, not counterproductive, and that have the chance to be fruitful, we're prepared to play that role. There are no such talks occurring at this time. But we hope that will change because that war can only end with a negotiated settlement. It will not end with a military victory by one side or the other, at least from a traditional standpoint of how military victories are defined. So it will have to lead, and if we can play a role in making that happen, the president is very much interested in doing it. We just, over the last few months, just sort of sensed that there wasn't a lot of progress being made, but maybe dynamics will change, and if they do, we stand ready to play whatever constructive role we can play. If someone else would like to handle it, they should. But it doesn't appear to be anybody else in the world right now that can handle it. So we're more than happy to do that if the opportunity presents itself to have constructive and productive talks. We're also not interested in getting involved in an endless cycle of meetings that lead to nothing. Okay.
Very quickly. Yeah, I appreciate that. Very quickly.
And then I got to go.
The president said that 5,000 troops will be going to Poland. Can you please clarify where will they be coming from? And separately,
they're coming from America. They're Americans. You mean specifically where? Mm-hmm. I'll leave the details on that to the Department of War to announce how these
5,000
Yeah, but in fairness, I'll leave it to the Pentagon to tell you the specifics of how logistically that's going to work. That's not my place to answer.
Let me ask you something you can respond. Can I get your reaction to recent increasing Russian campaign targeting Baltic countries?
Well, it's concerning. I mean, you always worry about escalation, right? You always worry about that. We understand, these countries feel threatened by it, obviously, for obvious reasons. So it's a concerning thing because you always worry that something like that can spark into something bigger. And that's always a possibility. And so we're concerned about it. We're watching it carefully. We're obviously engaged with our allies in NATO in that regard in terms of what's happening, and we keep up to date. But the underlying response to your question is we're concerned about it because we don't want it to lead to some broader conflict that can really lead to something far worse.
The Iranians today said, Mr. Secretary, that there's some forward movement.
I said the same thing. I can't believe I said the same thing that the Iranians did. There's been some progress. I wouldn't exaggerate it. I wouldn't diminish it. There's more work to be done, but look, there's been some, and that's a good sign. I'm glad they said that. We're not there yet. I hope we get there. The president would prefer to do a good deal. But you asked me if I'm optimistic. I don't characterize it as optimistic or pessimistic. We're going to respond based on the facts as we see them and as they emerge. So what the president has outlined as his priorities are clear. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. The issue of highly enriched uranium has to be discussed. Its disposition has to be dealt with. And, of course, the issue of future enrichment has to be dealt with as well. Those are the core pillars of any sort of agreement, in addition to opening the straits, of course. So I think there's been some progress, but we're not there yet. And hopefully that'll change. It may not. Honestly, it may not. We're dealing with a very difficult group of people. And if it doesn't change, then the president's been clear. He has other options. He prefers the negotiated option and having a good deal, but he himself has expressed concern that maybe that's not possible. But we're going to keep trying. I know our guys are still working on that very hard. So, all right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
आपको बताएं कि फील्ड मार्शल